It's been an interesting, very thick last year and a half for me. And my family thought that if there's one day I should take some time back, I should do it on my birthday. So I was forced to take a day off, and but this is important, as you know, to me and to all of us. And I think they appreciate why I need to spend a few moments with you and then go right back into the saddle and relax. But, you know, I want to echo the first commentary that speaks to how important this is. We live in a place and in a space where if we take a look only at the last couple of years, and we see the damage, the disaster that has gone through, the disasters have gone through right here in the Caribbean. And if we even look a little closer to see how each of those territories are still reeling and still working their way back to some degree of normalcy. And if you add on that, the fact that we have had very obviously a busy season, if we wanted to look at hurricanes, right? And that's not the only disaster that one needs to consider when you start to talk about planning. But if you look at hurricanes and storms as well, we can see that I don't see an end in sight where this is not going to be a prevailing concern for us. And so it means then, you know, for those of us who sit in the seat of leadership, those of us who sit with the ability to influence, that we have to be, where possible, proactive, but certainly learn from the past. And that's what disaster management does help us to do. We ought to learn from the past, and it could be the past of our own experiences or the past of other experiences. No doubt, you would appreciate that what the Bahamas would have engaged in with Dorian is probably something that many of the territories have never seen, and certainly in certain lifetimes. And so this may be definitely something that other territories now have to consider. How do we plan for something like a Category 5 that just takes a vacation over your country? What do you do? And while there are some elements that you just find unavoidable, you just can't do anything about this, or there will be some things that you could start thinking about right now as life lessons from the experience of others. I think I lost the presentation, Mike. And so, you know, that's going to be one of the things that we look at. And so the whole strategic focus in disaster management is for the standpoint of, one, creating blueprints to assist the clubs, to assist Rotary in the various territories with an appropriate response, and also meeting in such a way where we're nimble enough to change those plans based on new knowledge, new information we're getting. And then, of course, having a way to hardwire, find that information into the various club spaces so the communities can be impacted. You can see, of course, that we have created a structure, and that structure speaks at the highest level to what we do at the district from its oversight, and then really, you know, moving it down within the countries into the various clubs to themselves have plans. But we need this to be off the lips of not only Rotarians. We need communities to be thinking this way. And so we have to find a way through education, through participation, getting families, homes involved in this conversation so that they too can now move based on knowledge. It's sad though that sometimes we only see movement when someone has actually experienced it, and now, you know, experience it becomes the best teacher for them. We need to take those experiences and put them in the face of others so they can appreciate the challenges. We continue to use strong linkages in our processes, and so we know to do this properly, we need to have relationships, we need to have funding, and part of the funding structure that we have, of course, is one where the district is supported through each Rotarian with a $5 commitment. That is a part of our district emergency management fund. And so we look to that to continue to sustain the fund. But, you know, we could not do this. We could not have responded in the ways we've done in the past and that we are currently doing without partners, without looking to support throughout the districts around us, the zone, certainly around Rotary at large, our partners at DNA RAG, and other participants who together we forge a response to bring communities back to a level of normalcy. So really excited about that. And we hope that the structure is something that we can embed in all of our clubs. Continue. So here is just a blueprint for you to see of the management team and how that's laid out. Just come back one for me, please. Come back one for me, where you see the function of the disaster management committee and what we anticipate this team will do in their role and function. And more importantly, as you talk about Rotary really being involved in the recovery phase, right? And that's the space that we prefer to sit in. I would say, would it not have been for Rotary, when I look at the pictures that I would have seen in BVI, in St. Martin, and in the Bahamas, where from the relief standpoint, being there in the immediacy, even Haiti, being there in the immediacy in the moment to bring relief to persons, I would think that the responses would have been even much more devastating than I would have seen. And if we've seen where on record that communities have come and praised and hailed Rotary in assisting in the relief. And so while we are strong in the recovery, there's certainly a space that we occupy and are expected to occupy in the relief. And we need to be very diligent and deliberate about that. We have to engage it with caution because we don't want to stay there. We want to get people back to a level of normalcy. But I want to thank Rotarians who have come to the response of communities in that relief effort, knowing how important it is. And then, of course, this committee, as it has this overarching responsibility, has to have a level of frequency of meeting because, these disasters are not waiting on us, right? So we have to be constantly meeting and looking at what is the new information in the space to help us. And as you can see the structure of the committee laid out. Next slide for me, please. So the disaster is in front of all of us right now, COVID. This virus is an interesting one. All of us have our experiences, and we look at COVID. Just come back one for me, please. We look at where we are right now in the COVID response. We've seen in a number of the Caribbean islands and countries where they would have relaxed the rules regarding COVID, have had to most recently re-engage those rules with curfews or other safeties because of resurgence. And, there is no end in sight that is visible. We know of all the conjecture in the market space concerning vaccines, et cetera. But at this juncture, this still remains a clear and present danger. As a result of it, it has had a significant impact on the way our clubs would interact one with another, with their members, and indeed how Rotarians have had to make life decisions. And I just came off a call most recently where we talked about this. Rotarians themselves have had issues with either losing jobs, their businesses being impacted. I just had a meeting where there is a club where the entirety of the members are saying, we don't think we could do this right now. And so we have seen a significant impact of COVID-19 on Rotary itself, and certainly on communities. And I appreciate that Rotary has really helped clubs to make sound decisions during this time. And it didn't only suggest that you do it. Rotary themselves have shown in their own example that this is a time for us to be safe in our engagement and in our activity and our protocols. And we continue to provide that information to our Rotarians on our district website. But of course, there's the Rotary support information to help our clubs. As I meet and I walk and move through the district, clubs you've got those who really love to meet together, right? And it's just not going to happen right now. And keeping them engaged and keeping them still excited about Rotary. And then really having a conversation of, there's some new people who've come to this space of Rotary because we've invested and we have created this new virtual platform. And clubs are having to make that sober conversation and decision about how we're going to look post-COVID. I'm walking with them along the journey. But COVID has come to provide a new reference point for us in terms of how we're going to redesign Rotary within our territories. But a lot of the clubs, I must say I'm excited about, have found significant projects that they can do in this response. And that's, again, the disaster management, helping clubs to know, here are some of the things that you could be doing in your communities to safeguard, protect, reduce the additional spread. So these are things that we have to consider, not just hurricanes and fires and things that usually in front of us. When these things happen, here are two opportunities. You can go to the next slide. And so the preparation, you know, one would say that we're kind of behind on this. One of the good things is we are layering on years of activity in this space. And so we have a number of clubs that are very mature in the disaster preparedness, the disaster preparation space. We do seek to work with all of our clubs, getting every club up to a place where there has been the conversation strategically. There has been the move towards designing and developing a structured plan that speaks to, one, how do you ensure that your members first, and I preach this, you know, we have to be very clear that the first thing we do is we make sure the members of our clubs, that they're safe and we're satisfied where they are. And then we talk about the club's deliberate response then to the communities. And so, and this is during pre and during and post. And so it's important that they have a structure. And so we have some submission deadlines that we would like to have the clubs provide that information in terms of their plans getting into the committee, so that one, we can tick off that they have. Two, we can ensure that they have taken into consideration all the elements, so they have to be vetted. And then of course, we talk about now the next phase of submission of plan and the simulation exercise that is expected to occur. And then of course, the post discussion of what we've learned as a result of it. And Mike, I'm sure, will talk a little bit more about this. And so that's my introductory commentary. I want to thank everyone for coming in this evening, and I look forward to the presentations, but more importantly, the discussion and dialogue, as we all consider this something that we need to invest our time, our passions, our skills in. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, DG. We can take any quick questions here. We have question and answer at the end, but thank you so much, DG, for staying. We understand your family may need you to go away, but you let us know and work with that. Thank you very much, DG. Does anybody have any questions, particularly for the DG at this point in time? Not. Okay, we moving on. The next part of our webinar, is dealing with the issue, you know, why should clubs prepare? Why take the time and effort to prepare? Why not just chance it and hope everything good happens? I'd like to introduce PhD Claude Serena, which I know is no stranger to all. Lovely person to work with, really an icon in terms of disaster management. Claude, we're going to go over to you and ask you to take us further. And why should clubs prepare?
Okay, thank you very much, Mike. And good evening to DG Charles, which is his birthday today. Happy birthday. And good evening to all of you. I'm very happy to participate in that webinar, which is very important for us. And as you said, this is very important to know why we should be aware or should be prepared for the hurricane. You know, the hurricane season is usually between June and November, but we know that sometimes it's a disaster or hurricane, some disaster could happen even after November. If you consider the earthquake in 2010, will happen on January 2010. So we I wanted to give a little story of what happened in the past, so that for us to really consider, to make sure, to be aware of what happened in the past and that might happen in the future also. If we consider these different disasters in the past, starting in 1970 with the Three Mile Island, and also if we consider 1980, 189, we had more than 11 hurricanes. And close to us, in September 1995, we had the Louis, category 4 member in St. Martin and Barthélemy. in between 90 and 1990 and 1999, we had more than 14 hurricanes that hit Florida. I know that Florida is not in our specific region, but I wanted to focus on that to let you know that hurricanes are still coming even when you're not expecting them. And about Haiti, you remember in January of 2010, we had that big earthquake. I will come to that after. We had Isaac in 2012, which affected mostly Hispaniola and Cuba. And in 1997 and 2017, we had Irma, which affected USVI, BVI, San Martin, and Guia. So we have to remember that. That's meaning that are still happening during the years. And between 2010 and 2019, we had 16 hurricanes in Florida. And during that period, we had more than 73 named tropical depression that impacted the whole Florida, which mostly Matthew, which affected the south of Haiti. And 2019, very more recently, and still going on with the recent, which still going on, that we have Dorian, which was a catastrophic storm, which is mostly in Bahamas. So this was to tell you exactly that we have to make sure that we've been prepared, because the hurricane, disaster, a storm, whatever will happen at any time, even if you're not expecting them. So can we go ahead, Mike, I'll speak a little bit about our experience in Haiti after the earthquake in 2010. And that will tell you why we should be there, because exactly in January 2000, we had a very big earthquake, as you all know. And this is a shake, this is an earthquake that really impacted the whole country directly or indirectly. And you know also that in Haiti, we had at that moment a very low preparation at all levels for the type of disaster that we had. We are not really prepared for that kind of disaster. And this extraordinary impact also has affected the human side, the human and structural point of view. Because we had more than 250,000 affected and 300,000 deaths, which are a huge disaster. But this gives us some opportunity also, the opportunity to strengthen the existing with the Civil Protection Office, Red Cross, and some local NGOs who are really working on site, but we are not prepared. But we took just the opportunity to reinforce, to strengthening the existing structure that have existed in the country. We had also to innovate some strategy, because we had people affected all over. We had even the possibility and take the opportunity to treat people even in the street. So people we find who have been affected, sometimes we take them right there in the street, because we are overwhelmed with what happened in the hospital. The hospital were full, and we have to innovate in order to respond to this earthquake. And this is one big earthquake that necessitated that very big and very huge international support also, because we were not that prepared. This is to tell you in this way too why you should be prepared, because that might happen anytime, and all of us could be affected by this different disaster that could happen in the region. And next, this is will be the last slide, Mike. Mike, okay. So why prepare? Why prepare? Because when there is an information regarding the earthquake, that in the radio or the different authorities announce that there will be a disaster in the country, so we have to be prepared. And we be prepared even before the hurricane season. And that's why Rotarians have to know what to do in a different phenomenon and why. Because whenever they announce there will be a disaster, storm, whatever, we always fear. We always have some fear, because we don't know what's going to happen. What will be the intensity? What will be the impact, the real impact of that disaster? So we always fear that what's going to happen. And we are also very anxiety. We have some anxiety, exactly because we don't know what will be the impact. And also, we are anticipating that we may have some losses that can accompany disaster. Usually, disaster do not come without losses, but depending on the importance of the disaster, that might be very low, but also, but sometimes it's very big with a very big impact. So we have to prepare whatever in order to be facing that disaster. So clubs and district should have a plan that way, and we're going to talk about that later with Mike and Jacqueline on why we should form our plan and what will be the consistency of these different plans. And also, actually, because the Rotary clubs, even in the past, even when they were not at the level of that, they are actually regarding to the new regulation. But Rotary clubs will also have to have a plan and integrated with clubs, even if they can still work by themselves actually as a complete club. But we will encourage them to work with the local club so that we could have a more important impact having Rotary and clubs working together in the same region. And also our communities, families, and DJ Charles talk about that. Communities, families, Rotarian, individual Rotarian also are required to formulate plan because we are all concerned, our community is concerned, our families is concerned, our broader Rotarian, so everybody has to be involved, has to be aware of what could happen so that we can work together and be prepared for the risk. And the best way, as you know, to handle the disaster is to have a plan. If you don't have a plan, that will be looking for some support that we might not be expected to have. And if we have a plan, we might already identify the people, the other parts that we hope we to allow us to have a better response. So that's why we should have a plan, and you will see a little further what the consists of, what kind of plan we should prepare that with the template will be presented to you. So thank you very much. This is what I wanted to share with you this afternoon. Thank you. Mike, back to you. Mike?
Thank you, Claude. Thank you for all you do for the district, for the people of Haiti, right, and for disaster preparedness in our district, right. We have our next speaker, someone who is very special to our district, who works very tirelessly to make sure that our district is well served and well connected. Was being with us through thick and thin, through Irma and Maria and Dorian. I'd like to ask PDG Phil Lustig from District 6930, who is the Vice Chair of DNA RAC, to address it. Phil, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you everyone for being here. Happy birthday, Charles. It's wonderful having you with us. I just wanted to take a very short amount of time. I have to conserve my energy. I am in recovery mode from COVID-19. And I can tell you, if you haven't had it, you don't want it. It will knock you silly. The why prepare is a question. I don't even know why we asked the question. I think everyone on this meeting has had some experience somewhere along the line with a calamity of some sort. And the first slide that we showed up there earlier may have looked really weird because it talked about 3 Mile Island. And that certainly doesn't have anything to do with the Caribbean. But when I was working in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, my office windows overlooked the cooling towers at 3 Mile Island. Some of you are too young to remember that event. But let me tell you something, that was an experience, and people have teased me over the years about my glowing personality having to do with the fact that I was exposed at 3 Mile Island to too much radiation. But when we had to evacuate and didn't know whether or not we would have a home to come back to, it was one of the most terrifying things. And I didn't realize the impact it had on me at that time until the tsunami in Fukushima in Japan. And when I saw the video of the nuke plant at Sendai, Fukushima, I had PTSD. I literally melted down myself, because whilst I was going through what I was going through with TMI, I didn't have the time or the luxury of time to stop and think about what was going on. But 25 or 30 years later, 33 years later, when I had the visual impact of it again, it was like, oh my God, you know, and I couldn't believe that those people were going through that. So why prepare? As Mike has up on one of the slides, it's to avoid anxiety, it's to avoid fear, and it's so that we will have a blueprint of what to do when something happens. And we know that something will happen. The worst time to prepare for a disaster is while it's going on. I will tell you, having said all of that, I've never met a disaster that won't laugh at your disaster plan because it doesn't care what your plan is. But at least you have a blueprint. You have a place to start. And for that, I encourage everyone to be involved with the process of planning for disasters at the personal level and at the club level. I just have done a personal level seminar for our district, and people don't understand what it takes to be prepared personally. You can live for a couple of weeks without food, but without water, you're going to die in 3 days. So how do you prepare for that? What do you know? And I have, and Mike knows it. I have a life straw, I have a UV light and then I have a Sawyer water filter. The total investment for those three things is under $100. But I know that no matter what water is presented to me, whether it's the retention pond behind my house or whatever, I can have water. And it doesn't matter how nasty it looks. It's stuff that will sustain me and my family. So those are the kinds of things that we need to look for. And I just thank everyone for being here and for your attention. Mike, back to you.
Thank you so much, Phil. We know it's not the best of days for you. You're looking a lot better than you did last week. Thank you so much.
I feel 1,000% better than I did last week. I'm still weak, but it's
good.
It's slightly better every day. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Phil. Thank you so much for joining us. You're always so diligent in supporting District 7020, and we do appreciate it. Moving on, we have a word from our Rotary. Rotary plays a big role in disaster recovery, apart from just sheer enthusiasm and dynamism and support. And we're delighted this evening to have Esther Alcine from the Rotary Club of Pétionville. And Esther is the Rotary District Disaster Relief Chair, working with us, and we're so glad to have her on our team. And we're going to ask Esther to give us some words from the Rotary perspective, because it's not just Rotary clubs. Rotary clubs are encouraged to plan. Esther, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Michael. I congratulate you for contacting me to organize this conference. And so far, it has been a success. Before I begin, I would like to wish a happy birthday to our Governor, Charles Philippe II. Mr. Alcimedi Hardy for this year, and President of Rotary Club Pétionville. This conference is very important because we all know that from time to time, disasters trigger us. It is very important to prepare. All Rotary clubs in the district should adapt their disaster preparedness and relief plans to suit the nature of the club and the surrounding communities. Maintain communication with Rotary clubs to make disaster preparedness and relief an effective combat effort. Each club should establish a disaster preparedness and relief their persons and communicate this to their Rotary club in the Rotary Club District Board. A disaster can be described as a very serious misfortune resulting 1. Fear of serious consequences, subjected practical tactics to limit the effect of disaster. Waste management, depending on your mind, means you can have project or you can give away trust or post a message on waste management, organize a training sharing for people. Community awareness, active disaster plans, you can organize fundraising, restoration, maintenance of community shelters. An important message to a character in the height of the week, a new active disaster plan will be sent to you as a model to follow in realizing your disaster plan to your club. I speak for all clubs that have not yet written this plan. For the height, thank you for listening. For the questions, you can identify yourself and write them on the chat. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much. That's a very important message there, right? We're really so glad you're part of our team. You bring enthusiasm and knowledge and all the strength of Rotary, and we look forward to more working further with Rotary and you.
Thank you, Michael.
Pleasure. I'm going to move on, but I'm going to ask if there are any burning questions at this stage that we need to take, or we can move on and have our questions at the end. Does anybody raise your hands? If not, I'll just move on, right? I'm going to speak to you just briefly a little bit about disaster preparedness in our district. And disaster preparedness is a subset of our overall district disaster relief program, right? DG Child spoke about the higher level committee monitoring everything. A key part of the district strategy is to be prepared, and that's what the role of the disaster preparedness committee. Really have an excellent team of Claude and Jackie and Esther, and you're not with us. These are our goals as a district committee. You know, our role is to champion out there and bring the subject out and have people engaged and motivated and empowered to consider that are around us, right, and how they impact our communities. Each community, each situation is different. As a district committee, you know, we encourage clubs to foster discussions on the whole issue of disaster management. Get your local disaster management officials in your community to come and speak at club meetings and engage them and do things to bring up the issues that we need to protect and prepare ourselves for disasters and build all those important relationships that we need with the various disaster agencies and organizations in our district. A key part of our effort, where we measure ourselves, is that we want to get every Rotary club, every Rotaract club to have a disaster preparedness plan, right? That's a continuing activity, and we also encourage them to update their plans annually or whenever it's important, right? We give the DG advice, And we are glad to be part of the wider district disaster recovery committee and our meetings which have gone on. In terms of, we have a great team in disaster preparedness, right? We have Claude Serena, we have Jackie, we have Esther Alcimi, who we joined from, and Aeronaut from St. Martin Mid-Isle, who unfortunately can't be with us this evening due to some other commitments. But that's our team, and our efforts are to achieve the goals that I outlined before. A key issue that always comes up in our discussions on disaster relief recovery is the two situations. We have needs for immediate relief after disaster, right? Immediately after disaster, and those needs are urgent. They're life-threatening. People need shelter. They need food. They need medical attention, right? And as Rotarians, we naturally do a lot of that. But we realize that Rotarians are not necessarily the best funders. So we partner with the other emergency management services in our communities, keep good relations with them. Whenever we've had disasters, we have organizations like DNA, RAG, Shelter Box, Disaster Aid USA, always first on the line that same day with us. What's the situation? How can we help, right? But then there's the other side of disasters, and that's the long-term recovery. And that's the time when the TV cameras go away, people are a little better housed, right? They may have a tarp over their head, and they're looking for how does the community recuperate? And those are natural things that Rotary spends a lot of on, right? We rebuild communities. We're there when the TV goes away, right? Our partners are really within Rotary and other Rotary organizations and other partners. And what strikes me in all of this is just the magnitude of the projects that have come forth, just observing it. We had Irma and Maria, and we have Dorian hurricanes, just 3 hurricanes, right? In the last 3 years. Out of those 3 hurricanes, our clubs have done as yet over 100 projects valued just straight financial cash infusion over $2 million, tens of thousands of hours of Rotarian labor and other efforts being put in our way. But you can see as a district that our district is very busy implementing disaster recovery projects. And that's what we'd like clubs to keep in mind, that there is both the immediate relief needs and also look out for the long-term recovery of communities. After Irma, 2-3 years, communities are still rebuilding themselves, and Rotary is there helping. Yeah. In terms of how clubs can prepare, one of the startling observations that strikes us as district leaders, the club presidents and AGs are there, right, is that we encourage clubs to have plans. The clubs that have a disaster relief chair appointed tend to have plans. When we look at the clubs that don't have plans, we notice that they don't have disaster relief chairs. And this is an opportunity for leadership, the club presidents, to make sure their clubs have a disaster relief chair and committee active. AGs can help in that, right? We think that's a leadership issue, and we encourage clubs just to simply appoint a plan, a committee, and get going, right? We encourage you to engage in discussions in your plans, in your meetings, interact, clubs involved, right? And as we said before, really encourage individuals and families to make plans for themselves. How does this family get out of this? What are our supplies? What we need to do when a disaster strikes? So that's our rough overview of how we strategize to get clubs to implement plans. And I'm going to now pass you over to a tremendous member of our team, Jacqueline Hilliger, who will go into more detail and specific guidance with clubs about how to formulate. Jackie has a wealth of experience with this professionally. She's an emergency management professional. Jackie, over to you. Thanks so much for all that you do for our committee.
Thank you, Michael. And good evening, everyone. Happy birthday, DG. And I just wanted to say that I am so pleased to see the attendance that we have here, because it indicates the level of importance each and every one of you see in terms of disaster preparedness or emergency management. So again, it pleases my heart to see that the number of people that are here on this webinar, first and foremost. Secondly, what I heard the DG say earlier is that we may be a little behind. And I can understand why he's saying that. He's saying that because we're in the peak of the hurricane season and we want to probably, there's a level of urgency that we need in terms of moving forward in our plans and preparation. So yes, we need, I just want everyone to understand that there's a level of urgency in relation to this. Even though that we have the plans, that the timeline for the plans for, I think it's September 30th, it'll be great if everyone gets it in earlier than that so that we can move our timelines up just a bit. So I'm looking forward to the members, the disaster chairs, the presidents, ensuring that the plans are in place and come through to the committee so that we can review them and ensure that we have them available, and your check mark is there that you have submitted your plan. It's hard for me to believe that committees or clubs don't have plans. There were a few years ago when just about 90% of everyone had a plan into the district. Everyone, 90% of the clubs had it. Just dust off that plan. I'm telling you, you have it. Dust it off and update it. That's all you have to do, and submit it. You have it already. Dust it off and send it in. Okay, Mike, move next slide, please. Next slide, please. Oh. The preparedness plan. I'm going to go through as a formality, but we've done this before. And each and every one of you know how to prepare the plan. What is a formality? We're here at this webinar, and we're going to go through it because we have new disaster chairs and new presidents. Yeah. So here, we're going to start off with, when we start off with our plan, and there's a template, which is number 4. Okay, there's a template that's available. But that template tells you that how you start off the plan. It's an easy format. Tell us what the purpose of the plan is. Identify your hazards. Throughout the district, we have just about the same hazards. I'm going to get into those later. But identify your hazards. Provide disaster preparedness information. Develop member contact. We will talk about that just a little bit more, and identify member needs. The purpose of the plan, we need to get you to organize with the, you have your committee, and for the disaster chairs, you can't do it alone. So you need to identify a couple of people that you can work with in relation to this, especially if you don't have an already formulated plan. The goals and objectives, that's what you want to do. You have to identify the goals, the benefits your club will gain by the plan development. So we're going to give you also later on a sample of a plan, a club that we thought updated their plan since Irma and Maria, but it kind of identifies these pertinent parts of the plan. The scope of the plan, to whom it applies, and the overall impact of the plan. And I wrote this down, detailed written instructions to achieve uniformity. So what we want is when your club members read your plan, they all, and if they have any questions, of course, they're going to come back, but they're all saying we understand and we're on one page. We're going forward together in uniform. So you identify your purpose, your goals and objectives, and the scope. Like I mentioned before, there's a template that's available, and we will gladly share it. Mike will send it out to each and every one of you if he hasn't done that already. Next slide, please. Our hazards. As we know, the pandemic has created havoc throughout our district. There are many communities that are shut down. We've talked about the district management committee, and every 2 weeks they get an update from island nations within the district as to how they're surviving and the statistics in regards to pandemic. Right now, as a district, we don't look so good. I think I heard Anguilla is the only one that's saying that they're doing pretty okay because they shut down completely and they're not allowing anyone in or anyone out. So it's been interesting as we try to negotiate, to work and that pandemic issue throughout our island nations. Floods is the second disaster that impacts our communities. We don't think so, but more than anything else, floods is the second thing at this point in time. Usually I would have it as number 1, but right now I put it as number 2. And of course, we know hurricanes. We're in the peak of the hurricane season. September is the peak month. And that's why we need post haste. We need you to submit your plans immediately. If you need any help in relation to them, of course, Mike will share our contact information as we move forward at the end. Earthquakes, Claude spoke about earthquakes coming, impacting Haiti. I think it was in 2010. And there was a possibility of a tsunami. I can tell in the Virgin Islands, I think it was 1867, we had earthquakes. We keep saying it's coming, but it will come. The last earthquake the Virgin Islands had, and which is where I am, was in 1867, and it was followed by a tsunami. So it's important for us. Hurricanes are not our only disaster. We need to prepare for every disaster. So the height of it, of course, is hurricane season because that's where we are. But remember, we have other disasters that can impact us, all of us, because of where we are within the Caribbean and surrounded by water and fire and major accidents, but and any other thing that may come up. And maybe there are things that within your island nation, your community, that may be a hazard to you, but not a hazard to someone else or any of the others. Now, the question is, what's the difference between a hazard and a disaster? A hazard is the list that I provided you. It becomes a disaster when it impacts life, it impacts property. That's when it becomes a disaster. So right now, these are hazards. Pandemic is probably a disaster right now, but again, the difference is when it starts to impact life and property. Next slide, please. Next slide, please, Mike. Mike?
Index?
Okay, there you are. Thank you. How do we prepare? And there's a lot of discussion in terms of preparedness before disaster. We're asking the clubs within your plan to develop a communication strategy. How do you contact your members? You need to have that, I call it a call down list, but that list, or buddy list, but that list where you communicate with each other to say, I'm okay. You don't have to wait for the lead to call you if you have identified a lead, but you need to ensure that there's a communication strategy in terms of contacting members. And I put, if necessary, assist members with sheltering locations before the disaster. If you feel that your home, you live too close to the water, if you feel that your home may be fragile, seek help. Find a relative, a friend, or if there's shelter locations that are available, identify where they are. And if you feel that members may not, whether it's the president, the disaster chair, if you feel that members may need assistance doing this, identifying sheltering locations, please provide the assistance to them. During the disaster, and I'm talking about when I say shelter, before, because during the disaster, a lot of the response people cannot get to you. You have to, in advance, identify where you are, where you're going to be. You have to do this in advance of. Responders are not going to be able to get to you a majority of the time if you're waiting during the winds blowing or the tsunami coming or whatever. But remember, follow the directions of all local officials. Rotary has nothing to do with this. Rotary has nothing to do with this. The responders and the local officials are the guiding forces at this point in time, and you have to follow their directives. After the disaster, there's going to be hurricanes, we know it. And one of the things I heard Phil say is he never saw a disaster that didn't laugh after a plan. I never heard it quite put that way. But I understand it, and I'm sure you do too. Because as much as we prepare, there's something we just missed. So we're asking after the disaster, especially those that, for people that live alone, hopefully they'll be with someone else and not in their home alone. But hopefully they live alone. If they live alone, I'm seeing a question about where the template is, Mike. I wish I could shut off my chat, but it comes right up. But we'll get that to you, okay? But if people live alone, we need to find a way to ensure that we contact them, or we find a way to ensure that they're okay. Some people have health situations, whether they're high blood pressure, they're hypertensive, is the same thing, diabetes, heart situations, whatever it may be. We need to ensure that we identify our health needs, and it's a privacy issue. But if people need help from a health situation, we need to be able to provide that to them after the disaster. Next slide. Next slide. Next slide. There's a lot of talk that we've had about appointing a preparedness club chair. When we say assign clear responsibility, what does the president do? What's the responsibility of the AG? You know, but we know that it's important that you identify that disaster preparedness club chair, or disaster relief, I'm not sure. But that club chair is important. And we want you to submit that name so that we have them on record. If we need at any point to reach out to them, we are able to do that. So please, we're asking that you appoint that disaster club chair so that we can have it as part of our records. Develop membership communication method. Again, I spoke about that previously, just a little bit, but the call down list. How do you speak to each other after the disaster? And you should be testing this. We're going to do a simulation, and you don't need for us to give you the simulation date. Test it. How are you communicating with each other? You need to find a way to ensure that this list works. If you need to, include an alternate point of contact. You may not want, it may be a child, a relative rather, on the mainland. It may be a relative in Canada. It could be a relative somewhere else, but away from the disaster. So if at any point in time we can't reach you, at least we can contact, hopefully you've been able to reach your child or some relative, and we can reach out to them and find out if you're okay. Because I know even though we're doing this for the clubs, your family is going to be your first points of contact. You're going to be reaching out to them to let them know that you're okay. So if you can, please provide that alternate point of contact so that we can reach out to them and find out. If we cannot contact you, we'll find out from them if you're okay. The disaster supply kit. We have a sample of that, and we'll be sharing that with you as well, and that should be a part of your plan. But the one thing we want is for ensuring that you have at least 72 hours worth, at least, of water. And Phil spoke about that previously. At least 72, and that's a limited amount, at least 1 gallon per person per day. So if you have a family of 3, you need a gallon of 3 gallons a day for your family. So at least 72 hours until help comes, you need to be able to provide for yourself. Responsive equipment and availability list, we'll talk about that a little bit more. And establish liaison with disaster organizations for your area, And what we do say is try and identify who your disaster preparedness team is locally. In the different islands, we call the emergency management here. We are disaster. I think it's called disaster preparedness in other locations. But go identify who those people are and develop a relationship with them in advance of. So whether it's the AG, whether it's the president, but somebody needs to, and invite them. Like someone said, invite them to your meetings to start that relationship so that you all can have, that ongoing communication. Next slide, please. Positions with overall authority. You have your club president. We're ensuring that by the end of this week, we're going to have every club submitting the disaster preparedness chair. Every club. And today's Wednesday, so I'm hoping by Friday. Mike and them may say I'm not giving you enough time, but by the end of this week, I'm hoping that we can get 100% of our clubs submitting the names of the disaster chairs. We need you to do this. Ensure your plan is in place. Again, I spoke about that. The deadline for that is September 30th, but like the DG said, we may be a little bit behind. So let's do it a little sooner. I'm looking forward to receiving your plans a lot sooner than September 30th. Activate plan and call down list. It's an activation, but we're saying exercise it. I'm going to talk about that. I think we've talked about it just a little bit, but the deadline for that, I think the exercise is, I'm not sure, Mike, but whatever it is, hopefully we'll get all your plans and therefore we can move that exercise, that simulation up sooner than we anticipated. So I'm looking forward to the clubs doing that for us.
Yeah, I've done all that.
Liaison with Disaster Management Committee. The DG spoke about that, but again, there's a contest. We, as a committee, liaison with those with the Disaster Management Committee all the time. And I'm going to move on. Club Disaster Preparedness Chair, we spoke about that already. Your plan. Now, one of the things that as a committee we should be doing, and hopefully we will work a little bit more on that, is to ensure that we provide you with information when there's something coming up, whether it's off the coast of Africa, when it becomes a threat, we provide you with updated information so that you can definitely prepare. Member status check, he's moving me along. Develop strategy for members unable to be contacted. We spoke about that already. Identify how your call of strategy, that's one of the things that we didn't speak about. And what's important here is once you identify the president and the disaster chair identifies that everybody's okay, where do they share that information? They should be informing the AG, they should be informing the disaster committee, and the committee then informs the membership, the management committee. So we need to clarify a little bit and provide that information to you. How and where do you provide, once you've identified that everything is okay with your membership, where do you share that information? Go ahead, Michael. Next slide. External communication. During Irma and Maria, I must say WhatsApp worked. WhatsApp really worked. And that much I can tell you. But use whatever mechanism that works for you. I'm not going to tell you that WhatsApp may be the only, but I know it worked for those that had the opportunity to have connection. But of course, phone, texting is always a way. And the one thing that we spoke about and we haven't really activated is ham radio. Ham radio is the old-time way and it never fails. So if you know of an ham radio organization, invite them to your club. Have that discussion. How can they help you? Where are they going to be? You know, so you have that communication. If everything else fails, at least ham radio will definitely work. Social media sites, again, those also work. Establish club members responsibility for maintenance of the website. Yeah, a lot of us have that issue only because maintaining these things are not our full-time jobs, and it becomes a little difficult for us to maintain them as we would like to. But identify someone that's pretty good at doing it, just to ensure that that information is there that we need to have. Next slide. Next slide, please. Critical resources. One of the things that we ask is you identify amongst your club members and even amongst the other clubs, where I said partner with nearby clubs on resources, that's the last bullet. But just identify what resources may be available to you, whether, you know, Sweeney on E.G. Sweeney on Singapore may have a bulldozer, you know, and I know that there's someone, Liz, you know, that has a supermarket, you know, but these are some of the resources as Rotarians that we can bring together to assist our membership. So identify what your resources are available to you and how we can utilize them amongst ourselves if necessary. And it doesn't have to be within the club only, you can partner with other clubs. Next slide, please. Updates and maintenance. Review your plan annually, and it has to be reviewed annually only because your administration changes. Your president changes, you know, your sergeant, all of your disaster chair may change, but you need to ensure that that information that is provided within your plan as well. And new members need to be aware of the implementation of the plan and what the plan entails. So be sure that you update your plan annually. When we do our simulation, when we test this plan, there may be some shortfalls. You may say, you know, oh, something didn't go right, and you tweak it at that point to ensure that the plan fits your needs. So you correct those shortfalls at that time. During that after the simulation, you have what we call it, like a hash out, and identify what your shortfalls were, if any, and how you can better utilize and implement them into the plan. Next, after an event, after Irma Maria, after Dorian, definitely you should have reviewed your plan. And it wouldn't have been immediately because you're going through so much at the time, but at some point you need to sit down and identify how the event affected you, and if the plan was relevant at that time. Was it relevant? What changes do you need to make? So the best time, again, after an event, after a disaster, be sure to look at your plan and see if it's relevant for you, your members, and your club. Next slide, please.
Jackie, I've uploaded that template in our chat stream, right? Viewers can download it, but we'll also send it out via email.
Okay. And we may or may not want to do this. I don't know because I don't have it on my screen in terms of the plan. But one of the things I want to say about the St. Martin Mid-Isle disaster plan, there's something in there, you know what they said? Updated after Irma and Maria. So they reviewed the plan, updated it after the event, after the disaster, and made whatever relevant changes they needed to make. It's a workable plan, I'm going to tell you, and you know, so I don't need to go through the plan, which is an example of the plan, but I just wanted to indicate that they, at that point, updated their plan. Oh, Mike has it up. We can go through it real quickly, Mike, just quickly.
Sure, you guide me.
Yeah, just keep going. They were very picturesque. What they did is, they really did you don't have to do this, but they did a pretty good job of this. And they said post-Irma version. So which was relevant, making it relevant to the club at this point in time. Keep going, keep going. They did a little introduction as to the island itself, St. Martin. Keep going. Keep going, please. Keep going, keep going. I want to get to where they said the aim, the four purpose, goals, and objectives, and the scope of the plan. And they did a pretty good job at this. So here they are, that identifying what the objectives were. You went a little too fast for me, but that's okay. And then they went to identify what the purpose was. And then they went on to identify what the hazards are. So they had earthquakes, tsunami, before that they had floods, they had hurricanes, and the pandemic. All of these things were part of their plan. Keep going, keep going, keep going. Keep going, Michael. We're past the hazards at this point in time. But I just want to say, we don't need to go through the entire thing, but I just want to say that the mere fact that they looked at this plan and updated it after Irma makes it significant. So it's important, again, that you take the time to do this. And again, dust off your plans. You have it. Just dust it off and update it and send it to us. So I believe that's the end of my presentation. Mike?
Great, thank you so much, Jackie. You've given us guidance on our plan. You've discussed a little bit about, an example of a good plan, right? At this point, I think we should have a little question and answer.
Can I say one thing more, Mike,
please, Jackie, go ahead.
It's not that others don't have great plans. Please, I just wanted to say that. But only 20% of you submitted plans that we have. Only 20%. So we need you. I'm saying, how many clubs do we have? 82? Mm-hmm. So we need you to ensure that the rest of you submit. We just have this much, talking like polio, this much amount of plans. We want to make sure that we have all of the plans come into us. Thanks again.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I'd like to open it up for questions before we ask the DG to give us some closing remarks. I know he must be wanting family and time, but it's great to see everyone here.
Mike, Barbara Anley has a question.
Oh, Barbara, sorry.
Yeah, thank you. My question is, and it's just a repeat of what Chris had mentioned earlier in the chat, that getting the plans in by September is late. Why don't we get them in, like within a couple of weeks after the handover in July? I mean, most of us are already into hurricane season by then. And so not having the plan ready when you run the risk of having a hurricane, I don't understand why you wouldn't. Like, I submitted our plan for Grand Cayman back in June because I wanted to make sure it was up to date and everybody had the right information. So what is the reasoning for getting it in so late?
Okay, I think there's a little misunderstanding. This is the second time in this calendar year that we're going out for clubs to do plans. I think earlier in the year, April, you remember DG Delma and PRIP Barry Rassin, encouraging plan effort to have clubs update their plans before they demitted offices, right?
Okay.
So that happened, and Cayman was great with that. We saw your plan and a lot of clubs. But not all the clubs are in our district have plans. This is what we have on record, right? Just to say what we have. And from a club has a plan in the beginning, it's not fully updated with the new names, that's less of an issue. We have some clubs who have plans, right? And some clubs that don't have plans. You see that this association that a club that has a disaster chair tends to have a plan. And that's why we are very much encouraging club presidents to appoint chairs, right? If I go down to the end, just to get the exact statistics, we have 37% of our clubs that have plans, right? And we're trying to get to 100%. So that's where we are. This is the second time in this calendar year that we've been going around for plans.
Thank you.
Question. I noticed on the list there with St. Martin and that group.
Yes.
For the 2021, you don't have St. Martin, Rotary Club St. Martin ticked off.
Yeah, us too.
We submitted the plan on May 14th.
Okay.
To you, Michael.
Okay.
Cheryl Horsfoot, our immediate
and I don't have that on my list.
No,
Which
not
club?
when I looked at it very quickly.
Sure. No, remind me the club, St. Martin, eh?
Rotary Club of St. Martin, Cheryl Horsfoot, on May 14th, she submitted it.
Right. If I remember.
We did as well, and
Right.
it's not ticked off.
Okay. Well,
I submitted it
that's
last year and this year.
Right. Well, that's my because I remember St. Martin. All the clubs in St. Martin have plans. I don't have a.
Hi, Mike.
Happily update that.
Yeah, Mike, is there a way that the assistant governors can get a copy of the most recent updates to this document?
Yes.
And we can have them follow up with their clubs under their remit as well as part of the due diligence and support.
Yes, and we will be sending out this updated list tomorrow, DG. We have had a couple of updates this week, and that's the intention of that list. Once the AGs can see the visibility of who has and doesn't have plans, then they action it.
Yeah, actually.
Mike, Sweeney has a question, Mike.
Yeah. All communication lines are done. Power is out on Island A. How does Island A communicate with the district?
We knew you were going to ask that question, Mike, Sweeney. We knew it would be you.
I'm just wanting to know. I'm struggling here. And St. Croix.
No, because we've had that situation before, and that's why it's important to identify. And as you remember, Hurricane Hugo, which was, oh gosh, seemed like so long ago, the ham radios was the only thing that worked. Those were the only thing that worked. So it's important, again, identify who they are, have them come in, to the clubs. I think we need to start developing some of those relationships now.
Jackie?
Yes, sir?
In 2005-06, we had a network of sat phones that was distributed within 7020, 7030. That eventually went away because of cost. But I can tell you that in 2010, literally within an hour and a half or 2 hours after the earthquake, Claude was able to communicate with us because he had a sat phone. We have looked at sat phones again. The cost has come down dramatically. I'm not sure whether or not that's a viable alternative, but that certainly would address Sweeney's question. And it's just it's a district by district issue, and it all depends on resources. So, but
Yeah.
that's an alternative that really did work for a good period of time. I remember, I think it was when Gustav was trudging through Haiti, we were in communication with sat phones in Haiti as well. So
And an important thing to add on to that is to have a solar charger. If you've got solar chargers, then if the power goes down, you've got no other means of charging. You still got a live communication means.
That's correct.
And it is a conversation to have, only because for me, when we use sat phones, it didn't work inside. I had to come out, and it had to be a clear day where the satellite can connect to the phone. So there are other issues in relation to that, but it's something I think the management teams probably need to discuss, and how we can best find a solution for something like that question.
Jackie, when I watch SpaceX, and they've now put up 600 and something satellites in this network they're putting up. My God, you wouldn't have to look very far for a satellite with that network. And I don't know what Elon Musk has in mind eventually, but if he doesn't market that thing to this market, he's not as bright as I think he is, and he's a bright guy.
Well, I'm glad the question came up, because we have been reviewing satellite phones, the older satellite phones, which were just tremendous in the Haiti earthquake, and allowed Rotary to respond literally the next day, where the old Iridium system. We're very much looking to what SpaceX is doing this year, and later in the year, we are hoping that we will have some exciting opportunities for using it again. Over the time, cell phones have become more ubiquitous, but there are issues with cell phones. Jackie, you remember the webinar we had in 2017, the night before Irma, and after Irma, I didn't hear for 6 months, right? But word would come out via text, via WhatsApp, various means, right? The key thing is to find a way to remain in contact, right? But a key issue we communicate with clubs is don't depend on the cellular system, because if the hurricane is bad enough, cell phones are going to go out. So you may need to, as Arnold said, you may need to ride around your neighborhood to find Rotarians to make contact, whatever you can do. Right? But important question. Sweetie, do you have any thoughts of what you think we should do? Unmute yourselves.
The satellite phones work well, but that was back then, 25, 30 years ago. But I think it's imperative, it's very important, since we have this network, that we should find a way that we can communicate what's taking place in the court and get a response. But I don't know. Jackie is in the technical aid, and that's upper avenue in disaster preparedness. So she may be better equipped to, offer a solution along with her team. So I think, again, it's very important, and I look forward to some solution.
Well, like I said, the management team, there is a management team, and, it's something that they need to look at in terms of making something available. So I'm sure it'll be out of discussion.
Sweetie, what we see in terms of cost, and it does come down to evaluation of cost, is that a sat phone will cost us about a US a year, right? And the question is, how much should we get? Do we have resources to put that $1,000 US phone down just in case a disaster comes? But those are some of the issues we're looking at, and we're glad that you raised the issue for a further consideration.
Very well.
Are there any?
Yeah, I have a
Cooper?
question. Yes. Could I ask DG Phil, can you just repeat, please, those 3 water filtration items you mentioned?
I have a life straw. I have, it's called Aqua SteriPen, AQUA, STERI, capital PEN, which is a UV, that'll do, I think, 2 liters in 14 seconds. And then if you Google, or I'm sorry, go on Amazon and look at Sawyer water filters, they're the gold standard. Yeah, Mike has Mike showing you the Steri water pen, but Sawyer has different products ranging anywhere from $15 to $100. I actually carry one that will filter 1 million gallons of water, which is probably more than I'll ever drink. And that's about $100. But
wow.
Okay.
You know,
Thank you.
That's awesome.
I've not had a chance to write it down, so I'll look into that. Thank you for your help.
okay.
Phil, there's a request that if you feel up to it, to put the names of those devices in the chat stream, but that's some other information we can also send out.
Okay, yeah, why don't you do that? Because
Thank you.
I'm ready for bed. Done. I had an hour and a half club board meeting right before this, and it just droned on forever. So I see no other hands up, Mike.
Okay, DG Charles, you've been quite supportive, and we know you're waiting to speak with us, right? And could you give us some closing remarks, and then we'd like to more fully say happy birthday to you.
Sure, absolutely. And then probably afterwards I can sing Phil a song to put him to bed so he can get some rest as well.
Oh, yeah.
But let me thank everyone for this evening. You know, when I originally did my commentary, I didn't recognize any of you by titles. And if you appreciate that during a disaster or a major storm, titles aren't important. Even your wealth is not important. We've seen those who've had nice homes have their doors blown in, windows blown in, and they've had to fight for shelter somewhere else. And so we know that it's the great equalizer, you know, and especially in moments, you know, when you don't prepare, it becomes even a negative equalizer. So this is an opportunity for us to be as proactive as we possibly can. I appreciate the work that has been done already. And yes, some of you, your clubs may have already put the information in and we didn't get it on the chart. Apologies extended. The most important thing is let's get it done. This is a time to talk in groups as well. As much as I would love to see every club ticked off, it makes sense for you to start talking this as a community, you know, as a community of Rotary clubs in the same area. What are we going to do? And how do we then benefit from the economies of scale in that discussion as opposed to each club isolated trying to do something when we're duplicating unnecessary. So I'm hoping that we take the opportunity to have a conversation in smaller sects. And that's why I'm keen about the assistant governors getting involved in the dialogue so that they get the presidents, the clubs together to talk about how do we work together on a much more mass level to make this happen. Thank you everyone for your evening. I appreciate that you all have some things to do. It's a little late in the evening for some. And so with that, I bid you all a wonderful night. I too had an hour and a half. My alarm is going off. My son just said, Mommy said it's time to come.
Happy birthday,
Bobby. Yeah.
Happy birthday,
DG. Look what you guys caused. So the cake just came.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
The cake is there.
I'm heading to go cut. Huh?
Right.
Happy birthday.
Open it up to everyone to sing happy birthday.
Oh, hold on.
And happy birthday, DG.
Oh my goodness.
Happy birthday.
I'm thinking they're planning something for me.
Oh.
Hey, Josie.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
I got it.
Happy birthday.
Oh.
How old are you now?
Let's see the cake. Let's see the cake, DP.
Yeah, and thanks so much.
You guys got me. You got me big time.
Oh,
wow.
Hey.
Wow.
Very nice.
Happy birthday.
I've got cider
Happy
and
birthday, DG.
drinks and
I'm going to schedule a meeting on my birthday.
Now you know why we picked the date.
yeah, this is a tremendous surprise.
Thanks so much for First Lady Rochelle for
She's
working
in on all of this.
skillfully.
Oh my gosh.
AG Ken and AG Carlo, partners in crime. Wonderful.
Rochelle.
Thank you, everyone.
Good evening, DG.
Have a good evening.
Good evening,
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
Okay.